Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today we have a deeper look into Dynasty again. This time it's going to be with Nate, owner of the Packers team, and our XFL Superstars League. It's the salary cap contract league that we did. It's the startup, first year startup. With that being said, welcome to the video, Nate.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Is there anything you'd like to say about yourself before we get going?
Uh, my name's Nathan Robbie. I live in Idaho. I've known Coach Craig for way too long, several years. I've done fantasy league before. I've never really done a fantasy draft. This is my first time at it. I kind of have a good idea of it, so it was kind of an intriguing idea to kind of just skip all the other fantasy leagues that are 1 year and actually try to stick to like an actual league that is consistent throughout the years, if that makes sense.
Yep. And so this was your first salary cap contract league, and it was your first dynasty league as well.
That's accurate. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So with that being said, did you have a general strategy going into this league?
Yeah, actually, I really did. To me, like one thing that's different on this aspect of fantasy as opposed to general, just like year-to-year leagues, is it's math because you actually have to pay attention to salary cap. So my approach in general was just kind of like utilizing that salary as a percentage based off of point percentage or what I could potentially get based off of how much I was willing to spend per person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of in a way. So like the percentage. Were you looking at like spending a certain percentage at like each position then?
No, so like in regular like year to year leagues, a lot of your points generated from like a single wide receiver, maybe one to two of your running backs. And so, like, to me, I felt like the majority of my salary should be on those starting positions and the utilization of depth at those specific positions. With the flex position in particular, like, you could utilize a wide receiver or tight end sometimes. And so, like, I felt like if I had the opportunity, I could use a lot more of that percentage. But again, not to be redundant, essentially I focused on the one wide receiver and the two running back positions. In regular fantasy leagues, I tend to take my quarterback in either the second, third, and I've had one league where I actually took one in the fourth. To be honest, with quarterbacks, I don't feel like they generate a lot of points based off of value. So I don't like wasting a high pick on something that could potentially not generate. And then it's obviously very selective based off of the scheme that the team that they're on. So my specific strategy was spending up to 50% of my salary on those three positions at the starting position was the max I was willing to go for each of those spots.
With like you talking about the running backs and wide receiver positions. So
Most notably the running backs, yes.
like with your running backs, were there specific guys you were kind of going after? Were you going after younger guys that you could give longer contracts, or were you like sometimes, especially with the running back position, the way it is nowadays, guys they start for 3 or 4 years, and then a lot of times they're not even getting that second contract.
That's correct. So how I looked at it was I was willing to spend up to $50 million of our $100 million salary on Devontae Adams, Joe Mixon, and Aaron Jones. Now, specifically, those three were because of the good situations they were in. If you're willing to invest that heavily into those three positions, they have to be one in a good scheme, semi-young to going into their prime, or in a decent position with a specific scheme or salary. If they're just able to produce regardless of scheme, salary, it doesn't matter. They're just able to do what they do. And I think Joe Mixon this year was one of those positions I was willing to offer just because with a rookie quarterback coming in, he's kind of like the bell horse for that offense. So I felt like up to $15 million would be something that he would 100% be worth. I just thought that with the Packers in general, obviously they're one of my favorite teams, so I know them really, really in depth. I felt like Aaron Rodgers. Okay, we're going to backtrack slightly. When Brett Favre was starting to go out of Green Bay, essentially they tailored the offense towards allowing Brett Favre to be Brett Favre, throwing shorter passes, etc., stuff like that. So I feel like Green Bay is going to do exactly what they did last year that got them to the NFC Championship, which is rely on short passes and the run game. So Aaron Jones is just a tank, so I thought he was worth $15 million apiece, and Devontae Adams himself was also worth up to $15 million just because he's working with Aaron Rodgers. I did consider spending a lot more money at the quarterback's position if it was looking for longevity, but because I was willing to spend up to $45 million, I didn't really have the cap space to target like a Deshaun Watson or a Patrick Mahomes, which was actually in one of my initial plans.
So your quarterbacks you have are Aaron Rodgers, Tyrod Taylor, Taysom Hill, and then Cole McDonald's down on the practice squad. So do you have like a plan to address your position like going forward? Obviously, Rodgers has only got so many years.
Yeah, so Aaron Rodgers, a lot of people will disagree with me on this, but because of the drafting of Jordan Love this season, I genuinely feel like he really has 4 years left on him. Mm-hmm. I feel like they're going to throw down Jordan Love to like the practice squad or make him just be the third quarterback overall just for the next few seasons to learn. They're not in any hurry to get rid of Aaron Rodgers by any means. And with his contract, the way the lines, I think he'll sign maybe a 2-year extension before Green Bay's like, okay, it's time to get out of here. Mm-hmm. So to me, my original plan was to target Deshaun Watson. And I kind of gave up on that when I decided to fully commit to those 3 other positions that I had. And I kind of abused the draft style a little bit with a 24-hour clock for the bidding process. Mm-hmm. And I just threw out a bid really to kind of target Aaron Rodgers as a potential backup. He was kind of like my fallback. I really had no intention on drafting him. But $3 million for 2 years was just honestly a steal. To my opinion, he was probably the best steal of the draft and by far the best steal on my team. He's still at the end of his prime. I feel like Matt LaFleur and the scheme that they have will allow him to succeed where he's at. And that was actually one of the other reasons was why I was so happy with just sticking with Aaron Rodgers and not spending that much salary cap on him was because of the combination of Aaron Jones and Davante Adams that I had essentially already sealed in with the draft. As for the other ones, Cole McDonald I kind of struck out on. He's obviously been released already, so maybe someone will take a shot at him. Maybe.
Did he actually get cut already?
What's that?
Did he get cut already?
Yeah, I read that he had gotten cut already. He gotten released. I could be wrong on that, but kind of looked into everything on all my players last week or so, or maybe a couple days ago. I lose time in track. But anyway, so he's kind of a wash. We'll see what happens with that. But Tyrod Taylor, essentially with Aaron Rodgers growing up with Brett, he's very injury prone. So essentially I need a decent quarterback that can kind of play, which means unfortunately I have to rely on Tyrod Taylor and Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill was originally kind of just like a joke pickup, but he can be hot. And I know that they use him a lot down at Saints, so maybe if there's like a week that's like a bye week for Aaron Rodgers, might be a week that, Taysom Hill goes off. Yeah. So to be honest, my plan for that is in the next couple of years, probably trying to take a rookie. I left some cap space in case there needs to be like a trade for someone that might have, a subpar player on their bench or something like that. So honestly, I'm kind of feeling out that process for the future, but to me, I felt like Aaron Rodgers at $3 million for 2 years was just, in the short term, was too good to pass up.
So I guess I did look into it, and Cole McDonald, he did get cut like 2 weeks ago. So I guess when they brought in Trevor Siemian, they figured he was kind of expendable. For me,
yeah, and I mean he's young, he's really raw. He played in Hawaii, and I think he just. I don't think it's a level of dedication for work. I just feel like his mechanics are not there, and he was just kind of in a bad situation on a roster spot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with him.
When they did draft him, I didn't think it was a good fit for him personally, because they're more like run the ball, play action team, and like it's not really his strength. His strength's more going into like the shotgun, using his athleticism to help him out.
Correct. I agree with you. I know that I feel like their original plan for him just kind of got secluded based off of the scenario he was in. But I agree with you. I think when he got drafted, I was like, what? I don't understand. So I agree with you. I think he was just in a bad situation, and it just ended up how it was. I mean, it was in the 7th round too, so.
Yeah, he's kind of a guy I thought maybe go to the Saints and kind of take over that Taysom Hill role if Taysom Hill kind of turned into the quarterback, because McDonald, he ran a 4.6 for the 40-yard dash as well. So you could be a guy that you could kind of use all over.
Yeah, he's extremely mobile. I think his reads, he's kind of stuck on that first read. I think he needs to get behind a mobile quarterback to kind of help develop those skills. So I 100% agree with you. In a clock management style offense or something that's run heavy, he's not going to be beneficial enough. He needs to be in a type of offense like, I hate to say it, but like Matt LaFleur's, where there's a little bit of swing, where it's a little bit they rely on those running backs to utilize their hands more efficiently.
And then, so you think maybe like the rookie draft one, the next couple of years, you'll grab a quarterback then?
Yeah, the thing that's really interesting about the quarterback, like I said, I don't put a lot of value into it just because if you look at what you're spending per how much points you're getting back, quarterbacks are, unless you're like an all-star, you're going to average roughly the exact same amount, anywhere between 15 to maybe 20 points a game, depending on the league that you're in. Mm-hmm. So for me, I never really put a lot of high draft value. I would always take like a 2nd or 3rd round pick for a quarterback. and it's always worked for me. So honestly, I feel like the quarterback position is like a plug and go each season anyway. So if I had I don't feel like Aaron Rodgers is a plug and go style quarterback. I just felt like he kind of fell to me for a decent price. And if you're getting a quarterback at his caliber, say 4 or 5 years ago, he was a first round pick. Without question, people would waste a first round pick on a quarterback, which is something that I obviously don't agree with. So I just felt like he was good at where I got him at. So I'll fill the void later, like I do every single year.
Mm-hmm. Well, like if nothing else, you got him for 2 years, and then say the rookie draft next year's draft class has a lot of pretty good quarterbacks in it. We got Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. God, what the heck's his name? KJ Costello that was at Stanford, went to Mississippi State. You got 5 potential first round draft picks at quarterback, so that's somebody you could definitely grow into.
And if you look at our league too, there's you kind of got to abuse the fact of how many people you have in it. So I mean, like you just said, I got 5 decent quarterbacks I can draft, and then there's probably going to be an additional 3 to 5 the following season. That I can obviously address that problem. And honestly, like I said, I genuinely feel like Aaron Rodgers has an additional 4 years out of him. Mm-hmm. So honestly, what's the worst I do? Give him an extension of an additional 2 years for another season and just let him do his thing. I mean, it's like having Joe Montana when he went to Kansas City kind of thing. And obviously, no, fantasy wasn't a thing, but you have to look at the value of what you're paying a quarterback to do.
I guess the only thing that would be a concern maybe is with Rodgers, if you give him that extension afterwards, I don't know exactly how much money it'd be worth in this league, but it's probably going to end up being more than that $3 million. So his price may go up just depending on your cap situation.
I do plan on addressing it probably next season, definitely the year after, because obviously Tyrod might not be in the league at that point, and Taysom Hill, unless, like you said, if he does develop into an actual quarterback, it would be beneficial. He's honestly on a 2-year contract as well for me, so it's definitely a position I need to look at moving forward. But I think it's one of the very few positions I actually have a lot of weakness at, if that makes sense. And honestly, it's not even that big of a weakness considering I really don't have to worry about it for at least 2 years. Yeah. It's just something I'm on the short-term clock of dealing with.
Yep. And then you kind of talked a little bit about some of the people you're targeting with like Aaron Jones and Davante Adams and Joe Mixon. But was there anybody else that you're pretty highly targeting going into the draft? Maybe some defensive players even?
So with regular year-to-year fantasy, obviously you only really have to worry about the offensive side of the ball. So again, like I said, this was a numbers game for me. So knowing that I was willing to spend 50% of my salary on just those 3 players, I had to find value in mid-grade players, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. So places that I can just kind of get value for what I'm getting paid. So to answer your question, I really wasn't targeting anyone in particular. I was looking at essentially deals because I was willing to spend so much on the high points positions. I needed to find value with as little points as possible being used while still maintaining our league average. And like I said, I was wanting to save a lot of salary cap in case I needed to trade because being my first year, obviously you're going to learn mistakes as you go. So for me, I really targeted the linebacker position as a whole. And I had probably, I want to say 5 or 6 linebackers that I had targeted. I had a genuine list just written out, and I did feeler bids for all of them, and I kind of just stuck to the 3 that was going that I thought the value was still there in, which was Ladarius Smith, CJ Mosley, and Blake Martinez. I just felt like as soon as they got out of an uncomfortable range of bidding, which was anywhere between, I think mathematically it was $3 to $4 million a year. So I feel like I got a few older guys for a decent price, but they're willing to produce points now. And I got them for decent contracts in between 3 to 4 years. So honestly, it wasn't really a particular individual I was targeting. It was a position that could generate points.
Mm-hmm. And I think your linebackers are kind of balanced out too because you got the sack guy in Smith, you got the big tackles guy in Martinez. Mosley, he opted out for the year, so you'll be able to move him to the IR the way our league works. Yep. But you're still on the hook for his money. So you'll have to.
But I have him for 3 years. So once all this coronavirus stuff gets over with, I think he'll produce. Plus, he's had injury issues in the past, so I don't think that it'll be that big of an issue giving him a year just to kind of rest.
Yeah. So you have to move Kiko Alonso up, but you might have to throw in another free agent at some point throughout the year as well.
Yep. I definitely that's my most deep in position, but it's definitely got value there.
I know when I talked to G for his little segment. He said he was targeting on defense. He mainly just targeted sacks, which in this type of league is not that great, especially for like the outside linebacker position, because those guys that play outside linebacker and they just are like edge rushers, they're not really great in IDP unless they're getting those sacks because they're not making a lot of tackles otherwise.
Correct. So I wanted tackles, but I also wanted linebackers that could, if they needed to, depending on the scheme, could actually drop into coverage. So like I didn't want to blow a lot of money on higher names because I felt like it would just be dead cap space. Like I'm willing to sacrifice 1 to 2 points a game, knowing that I've, essentially used the majority of my salary on positions that can already generate me 20 plus. So I just need someone that can keep up maintaining that void while allowing my power players to maintain the bulk of my salary.
I think probably the strength of your defense is probably the defensive line with Ngakwe, Jordan, Richardson, Clark, those type of guys.
Those were all steals. Like they were the first people I started bidding on at random. And again, I had names like obviously just like when you do a regular fantasy draft, like you list out targeted players, and I like to do like a top 10 depending on specific players. Obviously, I'm more accustomed to doing the offensive side of the ball. It was very intriguing, like learning how to kind of just analyze the players that you were targeting, and again finding that value at that middle level. If you can steal a premier player like Yannick, for example, or I would even say like Tyrann Mathieu, someone that's always in a position to make a player generate points. I mean, $2 million for Mathieu, and then 2.5 mil for 4 years for Yannick. That's just a good value for what you have.
For me, actually getting the safety was my hardest thing. It seemed like everybody I bid on just kept getting bid up way too much. And then I got Eddie Jackson for real cheap, the Bears safety, and then like I was bid on somebody, then I get bid out at the last second. Then I ended up with Ronnie Harrison, who's the Jacksonville safety. He's all right, and he was only like less than $1 million, but maybe that's something to grab looking forward. Safeties can be like tricky in this too, because you almost want just guys that are, playmakers and around the ball, or a strong safety that kind of plays up in the box because they are going to have more value because they get more tackles in general. A lot of defense is just based around tackles.
And I agree with you. I think like I wanted to spend value when it came to the secondary position. That's why I got like Marcus Peters and Jair Alexander, even Jonathan Abrams and Matthew. Like they all are just around the ball at random. They're not like really avoided. They're not. They can be considered people you have to pay attention to when it comes to obviously Sunday, but like they're just playmakers. They always generate tackles. They always seem to have an opportunity to get a 1, maybe 2 interceptions a game. And obviously with the systems that they're in as well, they have the ability to generate sacks. So I felt like the secondary was pretty solid as well for the amount that I paid for them. And again, honestly, if it wasn't for me mathematically having a formula going into this, like I don't think I knew my limitations on what I was allowed to pay per position moving forward, knowing how much I was able to spend. So like to me, I knew roughly what gauge and price to stay in. And so that's why I ended up stealing these ones for what they were. Because it was pretty early in the draft when I got some of them, and I was just utilizing that 24-hour clock. See, a lot of people were wanting to still target those high-priced players like Watson and Matthew. Oh, excuse me. And so, they were generating up to like 10, 15 million a player. And so those players that were actually bidding against me were actually just pretty much dropped out because they didn't know how much salary cap they needed. But since I wasn't blowing most of my salary on the quarterback position, I had the flexibility to seal in these pretty decent players on that side of the ball.
Yeah, so you kind of took advantage of people bidding on the higher guys early on, it seems like.
Correct. But legitimately they're steals. So like there was a couple players that went above my percentage that I was willing to pay for them. So like I was like, okay, you're 26 years old. I don't think you're really worth the $4 million, especially considering the amount of contract I could give you. So I would actually just drop out, but I already had a secondary bid on a backup safety for it. So like I was having bids at the safety position almost 6 deep, knowing that all of them were essentially going to either be rebid or I could actually just stop bidding on them, knowing I had sealed the deal with the other ones. So I was kind of playing multiple roles every given moment I could. But yes, I definitely abused the draft style for sure.
It seems like with the players that you were able to get, you were pretty disciplined, I guess, in your contracts and like how many years you actually gave out to different people too. compared to like some other teams. I know the Eagles, he was giving like all these young players 5-year deals and all, and everybody was getting like $2-3 million. It's just like if half these guys don't hit, then you're just on the hook for dead salary.
Correct. And so, like, I paid attention to their age. Like, statistically, players, you should probably knock them down. And again, this is mathematical how I was looking at it. Certain players, depending on their age, justified the reason for me giving them the contract length that they were. So if they were like, let's say like 27, I wouldn't go any higher than 3 years for them, because the majority of players, not saying that this is the norm, but the majority of the players, they tend to get kicked off teams in that time frame. So by the age of 30, unless you're a premier player, like a quarterback, a wide receiver, like an important piece to the puzzle, you're going to either be put into a less desirable situation, which means less points in the long run. So yes, that's definitely something I paid attention to.
Yeah, and like what you're saying is like most players after they turn 30, they aren't as productive. And like even if they're a wide receiver, there's not many wide receivers after age 30 that are super productive. I mean, you got Julio Jones turned like 31, he's still all right. But
yeah, I'm not saying that they lost their steps and they can't generate points. That's completely based off the player, but you have to pay attention to their age, knowing that once they get to 30 in the NFL, the majority of teams will start to rotate their players to a younger player base and more generated towards salary cap. So example, like Joe Montana, when he was with the Niners, he was in a less desirable situation in Kansas City towards the end of his career. Or even Brett Favre, when he went over to the Vikings, even though you can argue the fact that he was better towards the twilight of his 20th season when he was at the Vikings. But look what he did when he was with the Jets. He only got them to the playoffs. But if you look at what he did in Green Bay before he left, he essentially went to the playoffs 3 times. So I feel like when a player gets older, they start to settle for money as opposed to putting themselves in a good situation, if that makes sense. So my cutoff for me on the majority of any type of money being bulked into an extension on a contract was solely based off of age.
So Jones and Mixon, you both gave 5-year deals.
Correct.
For me in general, I was just avoiding like investing in running backs too long term, especially like the way they go now. It's just like they all fall apart by like age 27 anymore. I know Jones.
I agree.
Like Jones, I don't feel bad about because he still doesn't have that much like work under his legs are still pretty fresh.
Correct.
And then Mixon's still very young, and he already got his contract extension, which I thought was going to happen anyways, because the Bengals.
I agree.
The Bengals, you can say whatever you want about them, but they always keep their guys. If you're a good player and you play for the Bengals, they'll give you an extension. They're not good
Look at AJ Green.
Yeah, they're not good at going out and grabbing the other guys, but they're good at keeping their own guys, unless your name's Carson Palmer.
That's truth. I feel like Carson Palmer played a role in that as well. But, yeah, I agree with you 100%. He's just in a really good situation. The 5-year plan with both of those in particular, I think there was only a few that I actually gave 5 years to. The other one was Hawkinston from at the tight end position. But that was just because of a bidding issue. But anyway, back to those two in particular. With how I looked at it from a mathematical standpoint, because I ended up sealing the deals on so many older players for the bench and backups or aging positions, I guess you could say, I needed to essentially guarantee points in the short term so I can help fill these voids like we discussed with the quarterback position. So $10 million a year for Aaron Jones at 5 years is worth it, knowing that even if he does leave Green Bay, he still has it. He can fit in wherever he wants to go, even if he does go to the Saints or, any type of like swing style offense that he can generate a lot of value at. He's going to be a hot commodity if he leaves Green Bay. And Joe Mixon, just like you said, at $13 million, I was willing to spend an additional $2 million for him. He'll have value for at least 3 to 4 years. For me, the 5-year was a bidding issue. Specifically, again, they were targeted players that I was wanting to get regardless of how much I was willing to pay for them. And I just think he's really good at generating points. And with a rookie quarterback going into this year, I think he's just going to be the majority of that offense. Maybe not as heavy as like Fournette was with Jacksonville, where he was like almost 30+% of their offense. But I feel like he'll play a very heavy role. He will help that young quarterback open up his ability to throw it like into the slants and those quicker like 1 and 2 read passes. And just because he's a name that you have to respect in the box.
No, even with that, like he doesn't have to be as big a part of the offense as like Fournette was, because like he's a better player than Fournette is. He's more talented, And then
Agreed.
even looking at this type of league, since you got him for 5 years, like Gio Bernard's there, and Bernard's been taking away the pass catching work for a while. I think Mixon's actually going to get more pass catching work this year, but Bernard's like 29 years old now, so he's probably done like after this year. So then Mixon could work his way into the passing game, so he could actually pick up more value.
I agree with that. And I didn't, because I spent so much money on the starters for him, like, I went and kind of just got a few, like, pluggers towards the end. Like, I obviously targeted Latavius Murray and then Callis as well down in Tampa Bay, but I didn't want to give any more value to that position. And so I essentially got what I needed to make it through this year, but that's definitely a position moving forward I'm going to need to target. But with them being on 5 years and having a lot of tread on their tires, I think that was a good investment for the positions I targeted.
Yeah, and every year there's going to be running backs too. So like when we get to the rookie draft next year, we're going to have people like Travis Etienne that coming out of Clemson, Chuba Hubbard out of Oklahoma State. Those are just two of the big name running backs for next year's class. But then the year after that, there might be a couple more. Like this year, you look at it, you had Jonathan Taylor come out, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Zach Moss. All these guys, Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yep.
You had 5 or 6 viable running backs come out.
Correct, and that's one thing I like about this draft league is, I do have weaknesses to the team at like depth at certain positions, but it's something that you can adjust and fix every year. Every season, you can just address your holes as best as you can and just kind of move forward. It's similar to what they do in the NFL, but you have to pay attention to the math on it in order for it to make it work.
Yeah, and then you're always going to have free agency too.
Yep, and trading. Like I have positions still available on the team on my bench. And that's just in case I can find something that's hot during the season that I can just kind of pick up in either waivers or try to claim in free agency. Mm-hmm. And I left myself about, I think it was like just about $6 million in cap, I think, and that was specifically so that I could. I'm sorry, just under $5 million. Excuse me, in case I needed for trading, or if I did need to pick up some of those other positions. The Davante Adams, like I said, that was my last pick at $15 million. That was my last offer that I was going to throw on him, which would have actually given me a lot more cap space to fill those bench positions. But the guy that I was going against obviously just chose that was his cap as well.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So we kind of already talked about it, but it seemed, for the most part, your team seems like it's in a kind of more of a win now mode than kind of build up for the future.
Correct. I do have a lot of positions I need to fill, but just like any league, like, I remember Watson's first year. I actually didn't even pick him up until I think it was week 3 or something. And I just because I needed a filler, and it was like the steal of that fantasy draft that year. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's going to be positions that'll just pop up in free agency. So I'm kind of risking it to luck. But yeah, kind of in a win more right now kind of situation, but it's only just because of how the draft kind of fell to me in a way. I'm sorry, not the draft, the auction kind of slid into my hands. My feeler drafts, knowing what I was willing to spend for cap space, I don't know if it was beneficial. I guess we're going to find out on the mathematical approach to it. But you're right. I feel like my team's kind of in a win now type of situation.
Yeah, but you still got especially wide receiver. You got a lot of older guys, a lot of kind of slot guys. But they're all good bargains. But it's just
correct
in the future.
So the wide receiver was kind of a messy thing, to be honest with you. Yeah. I knew I wanted Davante Adams, but I was only willing to spend anywhere between $3 to $4 million for the rest. I picked up Alan Lazard and Jake Kumaro towards the almost the end of the close of the auction period, and it was solely because I really didn't think I was end up getting Davante Adams, and I needed a wide receiver that was going to play next to Aaron Rodgers. And I felt like of their lineups right now, those two were the best ones for available for that. Randall Cobb, I just like him when he was in Green Bay. He's got decent hands when he can stay healthy, but he's going to do really good down there with the Texans. Golden Tate's just a solid name. He's always going to get catches. He's always going to get targets. So I think you're right. Like Cole Beasley, for example, as well. Just I picked a lot of older guys that were super cheap, super available, that could be used as fillers for the most part. Even Julian Edelman, he's just been so solid in that offense up there with the Patriots that no matter what quarterback they brought in, and at the time when we had this auction going off, Tom Brady, I think either had just signed with Tampa Bay or was going to and had already been released. So I knew that whatever quarterback was going to get put in that position, the one wide receiver that they were going to be comfortable with would be Julian Edelman in that offense. So I did target a lot of older guys. They were definitely value picks. It's definitely another position I'm going to have to target over the next couple seasons.
Mm-hmm. but I think like this year you'll be fine because
Hmm.
you got Devontae Adams, Julian Edelman, and Golden Tate. That's like is your starting three. That's gonna be fine because this is a half point PPR league, so you're getting half a point for every catch they get as well. And Edelman and Tate are kind of catch machines more than anything.
Yep. Exactly. I was wanting to pick Adams and Edelman and Tate. I felt like those were a solid three, and then the backups they just have decent value for what they have. Like I'm only paying them like a $500,000 a season, so like obviously knowing that I'm probably not going to get as many points from them, but they'll do, if that makes sense. They'll fill a void for a week for off weeks or injuries.
Yep. And then let's see. We kind of talked about some of your young guys and your practice squad guys already, but if you got anything more to say about them, you can go ahead and do that now too as well.
Honestly, Curtis Weaver and John Hightower, I've personally met them. They got really good character and they seemed really intelligent about the game the few times that I've actually met them. So that's actually the reason why I picked them up. I felt like practice squad is always a hit or miss. I mean, even like what we discussed earlier with Cole Mcdonald, like he's already been released. So I it's one of those things where it's like hit or miss. And so like I feel like the best value I actually have on my practice squad is Devin Asari. I picked him up for $1 million for 5 years, but he's in New England, and he being a draftee from Michigan, I just felt like he's got two really good coaches that are gonna maintain his discipline, and I feel like if he can really pick up on what Belichick's going to do up there in New England, I feel like he can definitely have a few good seasons coming into the future. But to be honest with you, I'm okay with Hawkinson that I had picked up obviously for $4 million, but as for my practice squad in general, I really think that he's something that I'm going to pay attention to over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and that was Devin Asiasi you're talking about, correct?
Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
So if you actually watch the tape on him play at UCLA, he was a pretty good player. I understand why they took him. They took him to be like the Gronk replacement, essentially.
Correct.
He's not going to be Gronk. He's not that talented, but he's big. He's physical. He can run after the catch pretty decently.
He's a bully tight end.
But he was a guy. He went somewhere else before UCLA, if I remember correctly, and he got kicked out of that school, and then he went to UCLA. It's kind of weird because UCLA usually isn't like a school that just kind of lets people in after they have an issue somewhere else.
That's true.
But he played well there at least.
I agree with you. He's like a bully tight end. Like he's exactly going to try and be that young version of Gronk, or he's going to try and eventually fill that void that's been left at that tight end position there. But I agree with you. He's very raw. He's got he's got okay hands. His route running's decent, but he's just a tank. Like if he puts in the time, he's going to be good in the future. Yeah. That's why I gave him the 5-year contract for it.
I could see him being pretty good in like a year or two. But especially like even this year with Cam likes throwing at a tight end. You obviously seen him with Greg Olsen in the past as well.
Correct. Honestly, like I said, this was like one of those like random picks. It's kind of like picking up Edelman. At the time, they didn't know what they were going to do at quarterback there, and so I just took a chance that they were going to pick up somebody decent. If Cam does decent there, Belichick will pay him, but it's on him to prove it right now. So either way, it's in a decent situation right now, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if they'll actually pay Cam if he does well. I think they might just burn him for a year.
Maybe, yeah.
And then
who knows what he's doing up there?
Then, like I said, there's anywhere between 3 and 5 good quarterbacks in this draft. He might just trade up and pick one of them too, or say like if one of these other teams picks them and lets their starter go, then maybe he'll go after them as well.
Yeah, he's definitely got options up there. I think picking up Cam for New England was actually a decent decision for right now. Mm-hmm. That's why I agree with the 1-year contract. But I mean, if Cam wants what he's been wanting, he's gonna have to prove it this year. Mm-hmm. And there's no other place to prove it. If you can play in New England, you're gonna be good anywhere.
Yeah, and Josh McDaniels is such a good offensive coordinator that he's gonna make something happen there. I
agree. I think he's got a good approach to the game. I think with him and Belichick, like how their mind works, especially with Tom Brady. Obviously, he's not there anymore, but I feel like the scheme and how they write up plays to get the best value from their players is. I don't want to say they're better than everybody in the NFL, but they make it a conscious effort to put their players in a situation to succeed.
Yeah. Well, and even Josh McDaniels, even when he was the coach in Denver, you've seen him make Tebow look halfway decent too.
Yeah, and Tebow's subpar at baseball. So, I mean, with that even being said, like, I agree with you. He went on that wonderful run with Tim Tebow when that was going on. I feel like obviously with McDaniels, his problem is the defensive side of the ball, but I 100% agree with you. He's a really good offensive coordinator.
Yeah, well, they're like the perfect pairing because Belichick is like defensive mastermind, and then he's just like
Mm-hmm.
McDaniels. Here, you take the offense. That's why Belichick's never won a Super Bowl without McDaniels as the offensive coordinator.
Yep.
So it's
And
just,
I 100% agree. I feel like you need to have an equal tandem. Like whatever your head coach is best at, they're going to focus on that side of the ball. You need to have a complementing coordinator to kind of help pick up that slack from what the team's trying to go for. I mean, McCarthy was really good at the offensive side of the ball, and they tried to do it. They brought in Dom Capers, to help essentially run that defense. Dom Capers been a head coach for years. So, I mean, if you get someone that's good on that side of the ball, you really don't have to worry about it.
yep. So you already kind of talked about your biggest bargain, which
Guy, he was a steal. I don't know what you're talking about a bargain. He was a steal.
yeah.
I should go to jail for picking up Aaron Rodgers for $3 million.
So I guess who do you think would be like your biggest overpay then? Somebody that you paid a little bit too much for. I know you were pretty disciplined in your way of going about everything, but
Honestly, it was a frustration choice, but I'm going to say it was a group effort. It's only because of the accumulation that I dedicated to guaranteeing getting him, and that's probably Devontae Adams for $15 million at 4 years. Yes, he's a majority side of the offense, but it was the fact that because of the auction style we had, I had to, because of how I was wanting to run the offense to generate points, I had to target Al Lazard or Jake Kummerow because both of them kind of filled that second wide receiver position just because of MVS and St. Brown not being obviously living up to hype like they do every year. So I felt like I dedicated a lot of money to guaranteeing Devontae Adams. I wish I would have got him. I think the bid before this was somewhere between 11.5 or 12 million. I could be wrong on that. The guy that outbid me just was I had actually jumped up his previous bid by quite a bit. Like I think it was like almost 3 million just to try and get him. He threw out his like last ditch like getaway bid, and I just swung in for the minimum amount I could over it to try and steal him, which happened to be the 15 million. So he would probably be the most I went out to spend. The only other one that maybe you could have that argument would be Jair Alexander. I would say he went above my limit for what I was allowing for the cornerbacks, which was 3 million. I gave him 4 mil for 5 years.
it says you gave him $5.5 million for 5 years.
Oh yeah, sorry, my bad. I'm reading the wrong piece of paper right here. But yeah, I definitely went over for Jair more than I wanted to.
That's probably who. If you were gonna ask me about your team, that's probably who I say it was. Just because like in this league, you almost kind of want the guy that plays across from like the shutdown corner, and he's not really
Correct.
like he's a good corner, but he's not that shutdown corner yet. So like he still has value like now, but like say in 2 years from now, if he becomes that shutdown corner, then he might lose some of his value because they're not going to throw to his side of the ball, or they're not going to
Correct.
throw to his side of the field as much.
My only that was literally my approach when doing my secondary, especially when you're looking at it from a points generation standpoint. But my only argument, I think this is the reason why I ended up placing that last bid for him, was if you look at how Green Bay's defense is set up, they're very, very heavy on kind of getting to the quarterback as quickly as possible. And in my opinion, I feel like the linebacker position is the weakest position, the middle linebacker area for that secondary. So, and the secondary, the safety position in Green Bay isn't that great as well. So Jair plays all over the place. Like sometimes he even lines up as a linebacker. But I agree with you. I feel like if he's forced into that cornerback position, it could have been kind of a stretch or an overpay. But I just know how they've played Jair specifically since he was a rookie, and I feel like these next 2-3 years he could be almost as good as Casey Hayward when he left Green Bay and went to the Chargers. Which, again, point generation is what I was looking at for. So
They play a lot.
I stretched a bit.
They play a lot of zone, don't they?
Some for the most part, yes, just because of how they like to get to the quarterback. It's a lot easier to play zone when you're trying to generate sacks, because it requires a quick pass. Essentially, is how offenses try to counter that position or that approach. And so you need a lot of like floating linebackers that got decent hands, and then you need like corners that are a little bulky that can play safety, corner, or even that linebacker rush position area there. And I feel like Jair plays that role really well in Green Bay. He's just the most universal player on their team. And if you look at how they utilized Charles Woodson in the past, I just feel like his scheme would be – I just think he'll be more versatile. I just feel like he's going to be always put in a position being their premier player on the secondary. Like Charles Woodson was always in a position to make a play. And there's how Green Bay runs their defenses. They always have their premier players always in a position to make a play. Yeah. So that's why I was willing to stretch for him.
I think just playing in that zone, it helps him out a little bit more too, because it's not like if he was just kind of man-to-man shutdown corner, they're not going to target him as much. But just because you got the zone and a little bit of cushion, sometimes they'll throw to him a little bit more than otherwise.
That's correct. Because you'll think that he's on one-on-one, and then he'll drop into that flat. You go to throw it to the running back in the flat, and boom, Jair's right there. He's got amazing acceleration. His reading and hands are second to none. He was a reach, but he wasn't that far over from what I was willing to pay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know G spent pretty much just the same for Kevin King, and
he's good. King is going to see some definite play time this year. I know they utilized him in the nickel a lot and deep with the dime. He's got good break speed on the ball. So honestly, I don't blame G for picking him up. Yeah. I can't go and target. If you look at it from a draft league, if you're looking to generate points, that means you want offenses on the field. So I can't dedicate a lot of the playability to the Packers defense if I'm expecting the offense on my reads normally to be on the field the majority of the time. And with LaFleur, again, making that transition to shorter passes, to try and get some longevity out of Aaron Rodgers, I feel like they're going to go for a lot more game management techniques. So I don't think that Jair Alexander or Ladarius Smith or even Kenny Clark, will generate a lot of points, but I feel like they're always in the position to generate a lot of points. And so that's why I was willing to go after those other Packer players, knowing that I had already had 3 other Packers on the other side of the ball.
Yep. Blake Martinez is probably going to be on the field a lot this year for the Giants. So,
yeah, I can agree with that as well. They paid him well, and he's worth every penny. The only reason Green Bay didn't sign him again was cap space. To be honest with you,
yeah, he can't really.
They're going to try and get Aaron Jones again. So, but Blake Martinez, he's got good sideline to sideline availability. As everyone knows, he's had the most tackles on the Packers team for several years. I was actually happy to see him go to a different team just for fantasy's sake, just because I would feel guilty having essentially 7 to 8 of my starters being all Green Bay Packers. So I feel like he's going to be put in a really good situation there to help generate a lot of points.
That's pretty much most of what we needed, or most of what we were going to talk about. But overall, just kind of the strengths and weaknesses of your team, I guess.
Strengths of my team is I'm gonna win now kind of situation. So I feel like I'll generate a lot of points in the next 2 to 4 years, depending on how I address some holes. I feel like a lot of people don't pay attention to the small positions, I guess you could say, when it comes to fantasy. The ones that you're needing to have as a plugged filled spot. So I tried to make a conscious effort to pay attention to tight end and that flex position, maintaining a decent value when it comes to the wide receiver, tight end, and running back position. So I had a good pool of backups to try and help pull for that flex position based off of their matchup every year. And honestly, that's kind of where the Taysom Hill signing came from originally. Mm-hmm. There's just games where he goes off, to be honest with you. And I picked up Kyle Rudolph, if I remember correctly, and that was very specifically just because of the potential of him being able to get more catches up in Minnesota. And with the new additions with Yannick up there, I think that the offensive side of the ball is going to see a lot more time, if that makes sense. And so I feel like a decent pickup if I need is a filler, if Hawkinson's not doing too hot or they have an off week or something, depending on matchups and stuff.
And even with our league, you can kind of look at free agency. There's going to be a little bit of free agent tight ends. There's going to be a little bit of wide receiver and probably a little bit of backup running backs. Just as the season goes along, and as all the league goes along as well, it's going to be that quarterback and some of the other positions that are going to be a little bit harder to get.
Yeah, precisely. A lot of people don't pay attention to in regular fantasy, players that are put into a situation to win, and then there's also and I'm not talking just the premier ones. I'm talking the deep positions. So I was on a 16-player league once, and that's where I kind of learned how depth has an actual priority in the things that you're taking care of. And so I think that's where my strength was actually coming at drafting these value players that are like top tier 2 or lower tier 1 type of players for a decent price.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'll generate an average amount of points, but average amount of points added up will generate, a decent amount every single week. So I think the strength of my team aligns with, unfortunately, my salary and paying attention to the book side of it. My weaknesses are 100% the age of the majority of the players I've got, maintaining health, and then obviously fixing voids in following seasons. Because a lot of these players they're good players. They're put in a good situation to score. So
yeah, and like even with that, it seems like your team's competitive to win now, but like you don't want to like risk all your future assets to like go after it either. Like at the same time, like the way your
Correct.
team's built for the future, like it's not like, oh, I want to trade off all my draft picks to win this year, because then like winning this year doesn't really matter if your team's going to suck for the next 4 years after that.
Correct. And if you're looking at like a dynasty league like what we have, this is something that you dedicate several seasons to. So why would you want to only play, let's say hypothetically we end up doing it for 10 years, why would you really only want to be competitive 2 of them?
Mm-hmm.
You want to be competitive for, all of them in theory, but, a realistic standpoint is like 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 seasons that you could genuinely have value in the league.
Or even like if you're doing a rebuild team, the goal then is to like have a shot to win a championship like 3 years in a row.
Correct. I mean, I hate to make a basketball reference, but like with Golden State, when they made that transition, they dedicated several years to getting extremely good players to help build a dynasty. Or even, with the Bulls when they got Jordan and got him Scottie Pippen. Like in football, it's different because you have so many more moving parts and so much more room for individual error. I agree with you. I feel like you have to pay attention to the longevity of a team. And that unfortunately comes mathematically. I felt like it was the best approach to starting a team. And I feel like I'm not really in a rebuild. I feel like in the next couple seasons, I'm going to have to really make a conscious effort to guarantee, let's say in the next 3 to 5 years, me being able to still make a run for a championship, even if, I like say season 2 or 3, they don't go so hot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like even what I did, I got a team that I kind of put together that could be good now. I bought low on some guys, and then like I got a couple of my long-term pieces like Patrick Mahomes. One of my strategies just was like not investing heavily in the running back position, because I didn't want a guy to like not be any good 2 years from now and then be stuck buying him out, and then you're still paying him like over $5 million a year in a buyout.
Yep. And then I mean, like with the running backs in particular, like I said, I'm going for points now, and honestly, that's what I'm trying to do. Period. Mm-hmm. But like, even if I'm invested heavily, like say with Joe Mixon at $13 million a season for the next 5 years, mm-hmm. and let's say in 4 years he blows out his ACL, and then that 1 year I'm stuck on a $13 million with negative cap or whatever it would be.
Yeah. You can buy.
I would still have a rookie on a $500,000 contract. In those first few seasons that I could fill that void with, that could potentially generate points. Like I said with Watson, when I picked him up his first rookie season, he wasn't even drafted in my 12-person league that I was in. I picked him up on week 3, and he was generating 30 points a game for me. Mm-hmm. For literally, I think it was like an additional 4 weeks after that. By that time, my normal quarterback was ready to rock. So I feel like there's always the advantage of having a filler in the future that's unseen. But I agree with you. Sometimes, like, what if Joe Mixon blew his ACL this year? Then I'm stuck for $13 million a year for the next 5 years. So I agree with you, but to me, I felt like there was just certain players worth that risk.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. Just my strategy that I use kind of overall is I didn't invest heavily in running back. I didn't invest heavily at defensive tackle, and I didn't invest heavily at a cornerback, just because those were like defensive tackle, especially like in fantasy, switches out so much each year. Unless you get an elite guy, or unless you get a guy who's elite at getting sacks, defensive tackles are all the same because they're all going to get a couple tackles a game, and that's it.
Like, to me, I felt like Kenny Clark and like Aaron Donald was going to be like mm-hmm. the two that I was willing to go after. They were like my two primaries. Sheldon Richardson just kind of dropped to me.
Yeah, Richardson.
Because Donald was taking way too much cap space. Mm-hmm. I was like not dealing with that.
Yeah, because Kenny Clark, I think, was a decent price there. I can't even remember.
Yeah.
I can't remember who all I got.
I think he did pretty decent in the draft, though, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well.
Oh, in the auction, sorry. I mean, I got Kenny Clark for 4, so that's not That's not terrible. That's pretty decent still.
Yeah, I brought my team up on the screen too as well, so people can see that. But like,
Oh, nice.
you look at mine. I bought into Darian Payne, who's like a starting defensive tackle for the Washington football team. He's $500,000, but he had like 50 tackles for a defensive tackle last year. That's crazy. And then
Yeah, that is. That's actually insane stats.
yeah, I got yeah, but like he only had 2 sacks, so nobody was bidding on him because he's not this big, like, and he might get more sacks this year. He's playing next to Chase Young now,
Yep.
and like,
So you were looking at value for like hidden stats. Like, yeah, I could get this position like an Aaron Rodgers when, like Derek Carr throws up the exact same amount of statistics.
yeah, or
like there he's just not paid attention to.
And then I like my other defense tackle. I got Jordan Phillips, who played for Buffalo last year. He had like 9 sacks, but Arizona signed him, and I got him for the minimum too. So it's just like the guys that weren't really big names. That's who I went after mainly, like especially on the defensive side of the ball. Like I got J.J. Watt and DeMarcus Lawrence, but Lawrence was $1 million. J.J. Watt was 6.6, so he's a lot. But otherwise, the only guy I really spent on defense was Isaiah Simmons. But it's just because he could be such a big difference maker.
Correct.
Yeah, and then like Tahir Whitehead was my other linebacker. He's my old buddy just because he's not good. He used to play for like the Lions. He played for the Raiders last year. He's not.
Yeah.
He gets a bunch of tackles. He's not.
That was
good.
Adrian Claiborne for me, to be honest with you. I liked his statistics. He's nothing that pops off the table, but I like his play style. I like how he puts himself in those situations to do what he can do. So I get that completely.
Yeah, Whitehead. He's just going to get a bunch of tackles. He's actually Luke. He's going to be Luke Kuechly's replacement in Carolina.
Oh, nice.
But like he's always just on a crappy team, and he gets a bunch of tackles anyways. And like their defense is going to be awful, so somebody's got to tackle him. And then
makes complete sense.
And then I picked up Dre Greenlaw for like nothing too. He was that 49ers outs. He played outside linebacker last year when Alexander went down, but they talked about playing him all over, and like he's just super talented for a rookie that came out of nowhere. I don't know. I picked up a lot of young guys that I like too, and gave them like 3-year deals. And then it's like, if they do something good, if they don't, like none of them were over like 600,000, so you just buy them out and it doesn't even hurt you.
Yep. You looked at the longevity of the contract. I kind of paid attention to some of that, but to me, it was mostly age and availability. Like I feel like I said earlier, the teams give up on certain players at the age of 30, not because they've lost a step or they're not valued. They're just, it comes down to, would you rather? It's like when Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb were getting their extensions. They were good players, but they weren't worth the 12 to 15 a year because they were at the end of their career that they were worth. So it was a cap space situation. And then Nelson went down to the Raiders and did nothing. And then Cobb went to Dallas, and now he's on Houston. Like, I just feel like after the age of 30, that was really what my approach was. If I felt like a player was good enough to make a chance on, it was a good foundation to start with. And some of them I agree with you. I think I should have paid a little bit more attention to specific individuals in their situations so that I wouldn't get caught in for the long haul. But like I said, I was mostly disciplined based off of math. Like I knew my limitations that I was allowed to have, so I really stuck to it. But I really like your approach because it would have definitely played a factor in the longevity of maintaining a salary cap in the future.
I don't think you have any like really bad contracts that are gonna come back and bite you in the butt either.
Oh no, nope. I agree with you 100%. And like I said, I left cap space and bench space so that I can sign rookies and pick up some free agents. And if they're at that stage, they're usually gonna be pretty cheap for the most part. So I left myself some space to help grow.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to say?
Not really. I'd recommend that anybody that wants to try a dynasty team to find it out. I felt like it gave me a different perspective on the game. Like, so normally when I was watching fantasy, I obviously watch the Packers play just because they're my team. But like when you're doing fantasy, you really have to pay attention to all sorts of teams, and it gives you a real feel for the game and allows you to appreciate it a lot more. Going into the dynasty approach to this, the auction style and generating, season to season, I found it a lot more intriguing looking at the development of a player, and it gave you a different perspective of the NFL. And so I value a lot more of what Green Bay is doing or what they don't do, and can value some of the things that teams in the past that I've disliked currently are doing or have done in the past. I can see what they were trying to do. So I would recommend it to anyone that wants to give it a try. It's worth it. At least it has been so far.
Yeah, I say just in general, even with like dynasties, or like even in like a redraft league, like the deeper you can make your league, you can make it more fun and you can make it more challenging at the same time. Like you become more familiar with football in general, and then even like
Correct.
when you add like the IDPs to the league, you're gonna find defensive players like you might find some names that you didn't even realize they were starting, or they're putting up stats that you don't even realize they were that good a player.
Yeah, and one thing that like you've even done with me when we're just talking at random, is like you look at stats on players and you can make a comparison, and you don't realize those certain players that are like twos on a team could be a one, on another team, or even some of the
Mm-hmm.
players that are just in a really they
I
fill
think
that void as well. So
yeah,
I feel like those.
you cut out a little bit there.
Oh yeah, that's it. That's essentially it. We were just oh yeah, that's right. We were discussing whether people should do leagues or not, and I was just essentially agreeing with you
Mm-hmm.
on the point scenario, like how each different style of fantasy can give you a different perspective on a game that you're already paying attention to, but allow you to appreciate it a lot more.
Mm-hmm. And I think even with like the IDP, like it's hard to like have perfect scoring for like IDP because like I said, you can have that shutdown corner and they're not going to score a whole bunch of points either. Like unless they're
But
getting
then you can make it.
interceptions. What?
But I was gonna say I agree with you. But then you can make it like a little bit more of a friendlier style, and then that player can essentially just go off the pages with points the next week doing the exact same thing.
Yeah. Well,
It's exactly how you set up your league.
that's why in this league I put in pass deflections as well, which is not like a standard scoring for IDP. So I
Oh,
put in
nice.
a 1 point per pass deflection. So even if they're a shutdown corner and they're swatting the ball away, it's still a point.
Correct. I
It's
think that's good. I think to me, I was so focused on particularly just tackles and interceptions that I really
mm-hmm.
didn't even consider that to be a viable option. But I feel like having heard that now, knowing that that was a thing, like I went through some of the points and how to generate it as just like a foundation. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at your guidelines and you're looking at the entire player base of the NFL, it can kind of get lost in transition for smaller points like that. You're
Mm-hmm.
so focused on the high criterias or things that can be met quicker, more quickly. The smaller things like those shutdown corners that actually can generate a lot more value on them. So if anything, like I said, even reaching with Jair Alexander, he's just a ball hawk. So even if he doesn't get it, it still generates points. So that's good.
Yeah. But like in general though, there's not that many pass deflections per season. I picked
Correct.
up Jamel Dean, who plays with Tampa, and I think he had 19 last year, and that led the league. And he only played, but the crazy thing was he only played on like 60% of snaps, and he had like 19.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane.
I don't know. Like, I honestly think that kid's gonna be a beast because he's like a big guy. He can run, he can tackle, and like they got Todd Bowles down there, and he's just like awesome at developing defensive backs. So
I agree. I agree with that 100%. And I tried to pay attention to like being good, like I said, in a good situation. And I feel like I agree with you on that. I feel like he's in a really good situation to succeed. And if you find really good value in those types of players, it really can kind of seal your team together.
yeah. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. It helps the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports. If you're a new or current subscriber who hasn't already done so, please hit that notification bell. If you got any comments about this video, if you want to see more people from our league come on, if you want to see Nate come back on the channel again, just leave a comment down below. We'll get that all set up. But with that being said, that's pretty much all we got for this video, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.